Millions in ads. The Chinese regime is pouring money into pumping out propaganda. Its medium, legacy U.S. media, disguised as opinion pieces. China Daily's ad inserts trace back to the Chinese Communist Party. But what's the goal? Reports point to the millions spent ahead of U.S. elections, aiming to sway public opinion. Those ads highlighting instances of China's success in other countries and pushing policies that favor Beijing. From Trump to the head of Britain's intelligence agency, officials are sounding the alarm. What does this mean for democracy? What do you think? Let us know below and subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Despite the U.S. government's current eye on China, Beijing is still pulling out tricks to lobby influence with Americans. One of its most recent tactics, tapping into local media. Here are the details.
China Daily, the Chinese Communist Party's top propaganda outlet, is paying big bucks for ads in over a dozen U.S. newspapers. These ads look very much like opinion articles. Among the newspapers printing them are some of the most influential publications: Time Magazine, the Financial Times, Foreign Policy, and the Los Angeles Times. The paid ads come in the form of news-like supplements titled China Watch, but without exception, they all contain a pro-Beijing spin on contemporary events. One insert from USA Today last June touted Chinese leader Xi Jinping's 2015 visit to a U.S. school. The headline described the visit as having left an indelible mark on students. And another one, posted last November in Time Magazine, 4 pages of flattering coverage of China's leadership and economic growth in a bid to lure foreign investment. According to its latest filing with the U.S. Department of Justice, China Daily spent over $1.2 million on such advertising. That was over a 6-month span from May to October last year. But where did the money come from? The filing shows that China Daily's revenue for the same period grossed more than $5 million, with 98% of the sum funded by its Beijing headquarters. Profits from subscriptions totaled only about $10,000. A China affairs analyst is sending out a word of caution.
The American political establishment, both legislative and executive, should be more conscious of the fact that a foreign totalitarian party's propaganda cannot pass for free speech.
The U.S. government listed China Daily as both a foreign agent and a foreign mission of the communist regime. Under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, any entity listed must disclose its financial activities to the U.S. Justice Department every 6 months.
As more details emerge, one example of pushback came from then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He said at the time the State Department designated 6 more China-based media companies as foreign missions. All of them operate in the U.S. He said the move seeks to counter propaganda from communist countries. He added at the time the decision isn't to restrict what outlets can publish in America, but to, quote, ensure that American people can differentiate between news written by a free press and propaganda distributed by the Chinese Communist Party itself. But it seems it's not just opinion pieces. Chinese state-run media have also had a hand in influencing U.S. elections. That's according to reports filed with the government. Let's zoom in on Iowa, known for its rolling cornfields. The state found itself at the center of political intrigue in 2018.
Regrettably, we found that China has been attempting to interfere in our upcoming 2018 election.
President Trump tweeting at the time, China is actually placing propaganda ads in the Des Moines Register and other papers, made to look like news. Reports also said the 4-page supplement aimed to undermine support for the Trump-China trade war. And there was a lot of money on the line. At the time, Iowa farmers were projected to lose around $2 billion from the trade wars. That's according to an Iowa State University study at the time. It expands outside the state, too. China has ramped up its efforts in recent years. Reports filed to the Justice Department under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, noting China has spent $280 million over the past 6 years to influence U.S. politics. That's more than any other foreign country. And it's not just the U.S. Head of British intelligence agency MI5, Ken McCallum, saying in 2020,
You might think in terms of the the Russian intelligence service is providing bursts of bad weather, while China is changing the climate.
Over in Australia, donors tied to Beijing directly paid politicians. That's an attempt to shape Australian foreign policy in China's favor. One case in the area involved a politician named Yang Jian, who was elected in 2011 to New Zealand's parliament. That's after he spent 15 years working for Chinese intelligence. His position in parliament involved dealing with China policy. And in Asia, similar situations played out in the lead up to Taiwan's 2020 presidential election, with reports noting Chinese officials instructed local media outlets to promote the pro-Beijing candidate. While that candidate lost, Beijing has ramped up other influence efforts in Taiwan, including disinformation ahead of the 2022 elections. U.S. lawmakers will move ahead with a bill to get Chinese-owned app TickTock banned in the country. That's according to comments from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Sunday. Reports allege the Chinese Communist Party had access to the short video app's user data. Here are the details.
House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy tweeted the news on Sunday amid national security concerns about the short video app, which is owned by China-based company ByteDance. There are growing calls in the United States to ban TikTok or to pass bipartisan legislation to give President Joe Biden's administration legal authority to seek a ban. Devices owned by the U.S. government were recently barred from having the app installed. McCarthy said on Twitter, quote, "The House will be moving forward with legislation to protect Americans from the technological tentacles of the Chinese Communist Party."
TikTok needs to be an American company with American values.
On Thursday, House committee lawmakers from both parties grilled TikTok CEO Shou Zi-chew for about 5 hours over concerns involving the app.
We do not promote or remove content at the request of the Chinese government.
Asked if the app has spied on Americans at Beijing's request, Chu said no. But his answer sounded less firm regarding the company's disclosure in December that some China-based ByteDance employees had improperly accessed TikTok user data of 2 journalists and were no longer employed by the company. Chu said, "I don't think that spying is the right way to describe it." He went on to say the reports involved an internal investigation before being cut off. McCarthy also tweeted on Sunday that, quote, "It's very concerning that the CEO of TikTok can't be honest and admit what we already know to be true. China has access to TikTok user data." The app has 150 million American users. TikTok says it has spent more than $1.5 billion on data security efforts and is contracted with U.S. firm Oracle Corp to store TikTok's U.S. user data.
Wedbush, one of America's leading research firms, says a national ban on TikTok is 90% likely. That's as other Western countries target the app, like France and Sweden. France will ban TikTok from the work phones of civil servants. That's according to the country's civil service minister on Friday. Likewise, Sweden announced Monday it's banning military members from using TikTok on work devices. Is Apple leaving China or staying put? On Monday, Apple CEO Tim Cook met with the Chinese Commerce Minister to discuss the nation's supply chain issues. Cook was in Beijing over the weekend to attend the China Development Forum. The CCP-led event is making a return after the country's extended pandemic lockdown. The forum took place at Diaoyutai State Guest House, a diplomatic complex used to house foreign dignitaries. During the event, Cook openly praised China for its close ties with U.S. iPhone manufacturers. He called it a symbiotic kind of relationship that Apple and China have both enjoyed. He also voiced plans to increase Apple's spending on China's rural education program. Apple, on the other hand, declined to comment on Cook's trip. The U.S. tech giant has relied heavily on China's consumer market and manufacturing capabilities over the years. But as tension continuously escalates between Washington and Beijing, Apple has looked to reduce its supply chain dependence on China. The company is also shifting some production capacity to India. Last year, China imposed a nationwide zero COVID-19 policy, earmarked by widespread lockdowns. The policy fueled anger among Chinese workers, resulting in severe disruption inside the world's largest iPhone factory, run by Apple supplier Foxconn. China's best-known entrepreneur has returned to China. Jack Ma, ending a year-long stay overseas. His re-emergence offers support for the Chinese Communist Party's softening tone toward the private sector after a bruising 2-year regulatory crackdown. This as Beijing tries to shore up a battered economy, rattled by 3 years of COVID-19 curbs. Here's more.
Alibaba founder Jack Ma has returned to China after spending more than a year overseas. He resurfaced at a school he founded in Hangzhou, also home to his e-commerce titan. Ma's travels abroad, which included Japan and Australia, were viewed as a reflection of the sober mood of China's private businesses.
It's our great honor.
One of the country's most outspoken businessmen, he retreated from the limelight after criticising China's financial regulators in 2020. Some regarded his comments as the catalyst, which triggered a wide-ranging regulatory crackdown by Beijing on tech entrepreneurs. Chinese authorities said in recent months they had ended this crackdown and would instead support the sector. But Chinese entrepreneurs said they saw Ma's decision to stay overseas as a factor hindering confidence. Hong Kong traded shares in Alibaba rose more than 4% after the South China Morning Post reported his return.
The U.S. State Department urging Americans and citizens of other countries to reconsider travel to China. That's due to the risk that Chinese authorities could arbitrarily detain foreigners and even cut them off from consular help. Just this Monday, China's foreign ministry confirmed that a Japanese citizen has been detained. Beijing accused the person of espionage. The person works for a Japanese pharmaceutical company. Tokyo is calling on Beijing to release the Japanese national, adding that Chinese authorities should allow the man access to Japanese consulate officials. Taiwan losing another diplomatic ally to China. This time it's Honduras. On Sunday, the Central American country switched its diplomatic relations from Taiwan to Beijing. This means Taiwan maintains diplomatic ties with just 13 countries, most of them developing countries in Central America, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. Taiwan's foreign minister accused Beijing of luring Honduras away from the island.
The Chinese always try to manipulate the event to distort our diplomatic relations.
He said Honduras asked Taiwan for billions of dollars of aid, and that it was comparing aid packages from Taiwan and Beijing. Taiwan's president said the island would not engage in meaningless dollar diplomacy with China.
Taiwan's people have already proved to the world that we never cower from threats. Taiwan's cooperation and links with allies and like-minded countries to jointly promote international well-being and security will only increase, not decrease.
An expert said Beijing's dollar diplomacy would only make the Taiwanese people dislike China more and wouldn't scare away supporters of Taiwan's current ruling party. That party taking a tough stance toward its communist neighbor.
Beijing's effort to get Taiwan's allies to switch diplomatic recognition, especially the ones in Central America, are really having an impact on the U.S. These countries sit in America's backyard. It's worsening the tension between the U.S. and China.
Taiwan said it would shut down its embassy and consulate in Honduras. An exodus of Western car makers is narrowing options for Russian consumers, and Chinese automakers are quickly filling the gap. Many Russians are left with no choice but to embrace Chinese brands. Here are the details.
Russian car buyers have some new brand names to get their heads around. Chinese makers have rushed in to fill the gap left by Western firms that have pulled out. That leaves shoppers to learn about companies like Haval and Geely. So far, the welcome is wary at best. Car buyers Reuters spoke to were unsure about the quality of the new offerings. At the price they're charging, the plastics look cheap, says one man. Auto journalist Sergei Aslanyan says that reflects a Russian perception that Chinese products are down market.
If a person in Russia wants to put somebody down, they will say that, hey, you have a Chinese phone or your car is Chinese. At the moment, people are not that hungry to show demand for Chinese products. We need to end up like Cuba first, to turn into pedestrians over the years. and then maybe we will lower the expectations enough for Chinese cars.
Sales figures tell a different story, though. Chinese brands now have almost 40% of Russia's car market, up from less than 10% early last year. The main driver may be the simple fact of availability. In the eastern city of Vladivostok, Vladimir Shestak sells Western and Chinese brands.
In light of all the recent events, we mostly rely on Geely sales now. But we continue to sell Mercedes cars. Some of them are bought via parallel import. Some are leftover stock from before.
Russians increasingly have little choice, with most Western brands already gone. Volkswagen's Skoda unit is currently in the final stages of negotiating a deal to sell its assets. The departure of such firms was one factor in a near 60% slump in total car sales last year. For many buyers, that means it may soon be a case of go Chinese or catch the bus.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 2 years. Here's what to look out for in our second half. If Beijing invaded Taiwan, how would Australia, a top U.S. ally, react?
I'm sure if we were called upon by the United States to act, then we would do so. It's almost unbelievable that we wouldn't if we were called upon to do so.
Is the nation prepared? We sat down with Kevin Andrews, former Australian Minister for Defence and a contributor with the Epoch Times, for his take. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.